What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. Welcome to the finale episode of this segment called Sabotage Bad Albums, which is a segment that I review albums that I do wholly consider to be one of the worst albums of all time. And for those of you who did see my community section post on the channel that I posted a few days back, there were two albums, Live It Up by Crosby, Stills and Nash, even though that I would like to review Deja Vu by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young for David Crosby. The other one is the one that I am going to talk about in this video. Limp Bizkit's Results May Vary. With more than 10 votes, the total amount of percentages has to be not a big surprise, because a lot of you guys want me to talk about this album. Results may vary. So I really am going to be personally addressing this. But this album, this is one album that literally was driving me insane. This is the fourth studio album from American-based rap new metal band Limp Bizkit, and this is the follow-up to the biggest album that they've ever released in their discography, called Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water, which was a very big deal for the band. The album sold 1 million copies in its first week alone, and people have been making Limp Bizkit a very big part of stardom in the late 90s to the 2000s by this point in their career, and Limp Bizkit then has become even more popular. But with the album of Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water, personally for me, I had a lot of reflection when I was getting into music, and you guys know how I feel about Limp Bizkit, because in my review on their latest album called Still Sucks, I really appreciate the rest of the band of Wes Borland, Sam Rivers, and John Otto, and as well as DJ Lethal. They are brilliant musicians. And with Fred Durst being the biggest form of an attention span for that band with that sound of theirs, he was just unstoppable. And loads of people will say that you can love him or hate him, but I unfortunately have been one of these people that just cannot stand Fred Durst, because this is the difficult relationship that I always have with Limp Bizkit. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The band, instrumental-wise, especially on the earlier albums, did sound so good, fresh, memorable, and extremely catchy. And with Wes Borland being a very underrated guitarist, definitely was the machine in Limp Bizkit's sound. Until Fred Durst opens his mouth, that just makes it a hugely difficult and annoying listening experience. This album has been known as the worst Limp Bizkit album, and I can understand and see why, because when I did review Still Sucks, I didn't like the album, and I thought of it as one of the worst records of 21, but I have just made a complete fool of myself, because this album makes Still Sucks even more listenable and so much better. Can't believe I had to be so brutally honest at that bit. Overall, this album is way too long. It is nearly 70 minutes in its entire length, 18 tracks, and this has been a very difficult making process right from the start, because Wes Borland was not involved with Limp Bizkit at this point, so most of the guitar work was done by Mike Smith, the guitarist for another new metal band called Snot. But from what I did see later on, as I was looking things up, that there were other guitarists involved to contribute to work with this album, with Fred and the rest of the band. So much of a major, big disaster and a downward spiral, not only in this discography, but of modern and new metal all the way through. Now, before I dive into the whole tracks, one by one, I will have to say that I still have $3 Bill Y'all on CD. And I did buy this when I was 14. And I actually thought that some earlier stuff of Limp Bizkit was pretty listenable. And especially with the songwriting, like some tracks of this album, and as well as Significant Other. But even when I also bought, strangely, the censored version of this album that I've already mentioned, this album has given me, like I said, this reflection, this nostalgia of discovering something different. And I still do give the rest of Limp Bizkit so much of the credit. You know, when Fred Durst comes into play with his own antics of lyricisms, of whatever frame of mind that he has with all of these songs, you know how I feel. And I don't want to repeat myself any longer about how I feel with Limp Bizkit's frontman. This album was a very, very different record for the band, because with the previous albums, they were unapologetic. They were energetic and full of upbeat and catchy formula. But with this album, this is a huge difference into the variety, and the album title, Results May Vary, is absolutely appropriate, because the results of this album do vary so much musically, but with lyrically some really downward spiral, bloated, repetitive, and a really pitiful state of what Fred was going through in a lot of this album's material. First track on the album is Re-Entry, spoken word, delayed dialogue in like a speech type of beginning with music notes, various effects of people involving weird elephant sounds. Then a high-pitched preaching sounding voice just makes it a very weird beginning. Then the opening sound of the band comes in with a decent riff from Mike and the rest of the band to start the album, along with Fred's very basic vocal notes. Then the next track, Eat You Alive. I remember seeing the music video to this one constantly. A heavy bang of an introduction with intensity, and the music was sinister with the bass and guitars, and the drums became aggressive as well, involving Fred's distorted sound. But he's bragging on and on with all of these words in a very uncomfortable way of lyrics, to a woman of him wanting to sniff down below. If you want to look at the lyrics for yourself, go ahead. The instrumentation was pretty good though, even when the bridge section was calm and chill, as we hear a different arrangement from the guitars, bass and drums in a separate rhythm section. But the lyrics to this song were atrocious in the verse sections from the way they had sounded, and it distracts this cope that I was trying to have when I was listening to this, because the rest of the band did make some effort until Fred opens his mouth with this filth. The next track, Give Me the Mic, is not as gross as the last track of Eat You Alive. The music to it was pretty passable, but not all that inventive as well, unfortunately. Durst then rants about people who are trying to spread negatives on them and try to copy them, as he was expressing some just fake anger. The whole thing onto the lyrics were juvenile without trying to add a personal stance. The chorus was repetitive, and it's not as a strike through the listener with this quicker rhythm section. And as I said, it's not as worse as the last track, but the idea of this turn of words didn't make the cut whatsoever. Then we go into some later tracks, all gonna go downhill. Underneath the Gun, the next track, slowing the music into a moodier tone, while the guitars drone and the bass remain as gentle, and the drums to follow it up in a separate rhythm pattern. Durst then spreads negativity as the words express loneliness and desperation. And if you think about it, this is basically like a suicide choice. It's so tiring and repetitive that drags on constantly, doesn't feel any attachment, which is a big bore of a song. This has minor effort of wanting something to be emotional and to find some attachments to it. The pacing of the song goes on with a little amount of guitar work, but even Mike's guitar solo was pretty solid on some part later into the track to hear something nice with a bit of variety. Down Another Day. Sam Rivers' bass lines were very good and well quiet delayed guitar notes, adding a separate texture. There was a bit of a form of a melody from the whole voice, but it's the performance of Fred's, from the sound, uninspired and awfully weary to feel any emotion just because of the music being so calm and laid back. And it did not fit in this gut-wrenching feeling. And that's a big shame because musically, this sounded pretty decent. But I just can't feel any soul into this song because of the way Fred Durst sings, saying summer days were the better days, while the winter days were worse during a time in a relationship. Almost over. This is pretty much like an absolute alike take instrumentally of an earlier track like Take a Look Around, for example, which isn't saying much to hear a dynamic form. Addressing lyrics when Fred was feeling difficult and feeling being bullied all the time, and it's just sappy. Not want to overcome his troubled past and move something better into positivity. And that's just something that shouldn't be going on way too much because of the way these lyrics were addressed. Instrumentally was okay with a bit of atmosphere, but at the same time, like the previous few songs, doesn't feel anything memorable and catchy. It's way too overly dramatic filling with these looping words and didn't grab the listening experience into any intriguing direction. Build a Bridge. Oh, come on. Build a Bridge. This track is garbage. Some softer, mellow acoustic switch with keyboards, and it's got a sweet playing style, but there's no soul into this track. And the sound of Fred's vocals were boring and lacking any suspense and drama to it. It's one of the worst songs Limp Bizkit has ever made. It's dire, it's drab from its writing, sadly wasted from an opportunity that could have meant something. But yet alone, it does feature Head from Korn to make some presence and some presentation. Didn't make any strengths into this whole mixture of this song. The album weirdly does not make its own mind up because we go into a track called Red Light, Green Light. Hip-hop feeling, which is an abrupt change of sound into this whole frame of mindset, and Snoop Dogg does make a credit and appearance. Lyrically, it's absolutely broken, with annoying repeating words of the word baby from Fred's so-called professional rhyming. Really, really bad quality in this freestyle form. And this makes All in the Family from Korn's album Follow the Leader even more listenable. Snoop did deliver some more purpose with his own brief sets of better rhyming. the way it's placed on the album, it's remotely awkward. And it was something that is not all that special. From what we've heard on the album so far, a drench of emotionally dragged, forgettable music, but Red Light, Green Light, it's unexpected, but it did not match the other chances of trying to make this album stand out. Take It Home, which apparently is like the hidden track after Red Light, Green Light. A small interlude, I guess, with piano and awkward poppy drumming sound involving keyboards again. It's very short, but not as original to make the cut. And the lyrics onto this track is basically some repetition of crying yourself to sleep. But the second half of this album comes on. As much as I really don't like a lot of the songs on this album already, the next song after this, the only one, this song is an abomination of anything in Limp Bizkit's writing. Decent opening riffs with John's heavy beat. The bass sounded thick from the verse sections and onwards. Unfortunately, like Eat You Alive, this is one of the worst lyrics, involving a force of sexual intercourse with any attention span. With this behavior like this is misogynistic and it's disgusting to look at. This is a big insult to think this is good writing. It's uncomfortable all the way through for any female listener. How do you really feel about these lyrics? Did Fred Durst himself have to get away into this force and gross mindset of his and to think this is good art of writing? Musically sounded okay, but it wasn't that special to remember it. At least Mike did try his best to make other variations of ideas with it, but this song is straight up trash. Let Me Down. Annoyingly, again, Fred spreads more mindsets of women's actions that they were so negative towards him, and he complains about it with these multiple amounts of bars. Pointless. The band did do their best to create something like on their previous albums with some softness and suspense, clean guitars involved in multiple pieces of the song, but the sound was sadly pale and stale without any ability of a catchy performance and an addictive flow. Lonely World, the next track, effect introduction of Sam's bass lines, which sounded good, and DJ Lethal makes a bigger appearance. The beginning makes me think on Rearranged from Significant Other. The lyrics this time address with references of man being in the middle. The words and imagery were not as whiny a lot of the time, like most of this album's lyrical content. Instrumentally, it did sound solid onto the calmness and without any of the predictability that we unfortunately have to deal with. The second verse, though, disgracefully distracts things, making a repetitive form of him getting picked on and going on about it, which derails what I thought was something passable and good before the later verses came into par with this track. Band behind Fred, they, I think, did something that was personally good in my opinion on the instrumentation side, which I give them a pass. Boy, do I need to say anything else about the rest of this album, even though I'm less than nearly 5 songs into the whole thing, track by track. Phenomenon. Awful start from heavy guitar riffs and then changes into this hip-hop feel again. It's just awkward. Not a very good beginning. It was so strange. It didn't make a great idea of anything creative and unique. It goes all over the place, doesn't make a mind up whatsoever. A reflection of when the band were getting attention from their career and success. But it's just, as I said, strange. It's not as a terrible excuse from this song's whole proportion, but yet alone so misguided, and it was filler driven. Creamer, in brackets, radio is dead, mentions about the society and mainstream media that has changed, and the other things of society, and the people in the music industry were interested on other things of entertainment, mellow and pretty much intriguing, and it follows better, just like what I was trying to get into musically from Lonely World. And I think Creamer, with its musicianship, was pretty solid. This song, after the previous one, Head for the Barricade. This is the worst Limp Bizkit song I have had the displeasure of listening to. Bland music with generic ideas, didn't have any creative source. Fred boasts and hates about people who are hating him all the way through the song, but makes a reference of the Columbine shootings, as if he thinks that it does not matter, and he wrote it in this so-called idea of another form of bullying. How is this possible? What was that line? The worst lyric that he has ever written, which is a big waste of a song already, from the start to the finish. Despite the other songs did have negatives, and some instrumentations, as I've said many times now, that were pretty listenable, this is nothing to me. Nothing to me. The biggest trash of a song, in terms of original songs, that Limp Bizkit has ever made. Then the album insultingly includes one of the biggest hits, if not the biggest hit, to promote the album, the cover of Behind Blue Eyes, originally done by The Who. I can't tell you guys how many times that I will always despise this cover. The original from The Who had a lot of magic, soul, passion, and consistent replay value. It's one of the greatest Who songs of all time, and yet alone this cover. The vocals from Fred, when he tries to have some heart into this, was so bad. It is grating to the ears. Pete Townsend, up there, he deserved better. He deserved better, because there are way better covers of this song than this one. I have mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. This is one of the songs that I can't stand. Yet alone, I am shaking because I am so angry that this cover remotely exists. A cover that just makes me want to cut off my ears and gouge my eyes out. After this cover, we get another very short piece, another hidden track after this cover of All That Easy. The next track, another unexpected interlude, I guess, to finish the album. Very small piece, piano notes and pop beat, and Fred sings about wishing that everything is easy for a minute and a half. Album finishes finally with the track of Drown. What a finale to close the album on a slow downer, and it finishes things in a sour taste of music, because this involves looking back on views on the traumatic past, too overwhelming, and then the chorus says, and I say this lyric, save me before I drown. Reverse guitar effects and less distorting tones from the bass and guitars, and it takes place into this laid-back feeling, not as a perfect closing track, but it doesn't age well on making a closing track to shine as much as possible. So this album started things very, very roughly and bad, and yet the album finishes in not a very climactic form at all. Results May Vary by Limp Bizkit is one album that I seriously just wanted to enrage on camera, but thought to myself, just relax, you can do this, don't get so ballistic with rage. Now that I have a puppy in this family's home that, you know, I don't want him to, you know, hear my aggression because he'll bark. But nonetheless, that's besides the point. One of the worst albums ever made. And what can we say about the reputation of Limp Bizkit? Because after this album, I think their relevance and impact had fizzled down the drain when this album was released. Limp Bizkit, from this point, had not been the same anymore. And yet alone, as I said, that I have had a difficult time to try and get into this band, but Limp Bizkit have made records that are way better in the form of quality and as well as musicianship and styles, especially like with $3 Bill Y'all and Significant Other, even some from Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water. Now I should really listen back to Still Sucks and appreciate it far more better. And that album has more of a tolerable approach now, because I actually did not listen to this album before I even reviewed their latest album. What was I thinking? I need to hydrate. I need to drink this bottle of water, because water's good. Water's good for the health, right? Perfect hydration drink. And with that being said, guys, I am finally done. I am finally done talking about Limp Bizkit with this dumpy mess of an album. Man, I need to relax. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. Is this to you one of the worst records ever made? Is this the worst Limp Bizkit album? As I spat on some bits. Do you think this is one of the worst records that you guys have listened to? There may be some defenders to this album, but, you know, if that's the case, more power to you. Yet alone, that I would appreciate to listen to this album so much more than Results May Vary, Saint Anger. Yes, I would have had the balls and the honesty to listen to this album more than this record. Say what you say. I need to stop before I will go insane a little bit more, and I felt lightheaded, not gonna lie, on some bits. Anyways, Sabotage Bad Albums, with its finale, is at an end. Thank you so much for participating in these types of videos, and I am glad that I am going to be moving on from doing negative reviews, because what could be better things to do than to talk about albums and music in a positive manner, and as well as to keep this passion of loving music going, instead of ranting about it as many times anymore on camera for the sake of making a video. Peace and love to you all, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and I will keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.